researched and understood. Ooh. Okay, hopefully, no, you're good. Okay, good, there's no echo. Okay, so a little, context of the study. This is like not in the paper, but this is how I come to the study. When I was graduating from the University of Michigan with my PhD in 2022, I needed a summer job as I was finishing. And I had a colleague who, like, I have a job, pays fairly well, helps some undergrad students with their research, not doing the research, but kind of like processing and thinking about their research, thinking about graduate school. Great time, yeah. Like, I need to pay rent, I need to get out of here. And so I did it, and I continued to give an annual talk. So I'll go back in July and give a talk about how they can take their research forward and talk to their PI about taking it forward. But I really found the program to be pretty magical. And so I wanted to see if I could bottle up and understand like what was so great about it. And what I found to be great is the students created a community that was really supportive of each other, not competitive. Students thought deeply about going into graduate education. And I don't know if they did, because many of them are rising seniors, potentially rising juniors, but they gained a lot of confidence that they could. So after that, I was like, and I know there's these programs aren't super uncommon, but I wanted to see if I could understand some of the magic of this program, where a lot of the students were both applying to the University of Michigan in particular. So it was a recruitment tool, but also a vast majority of them were applying to somewhere for graduate education, and most of them came from all of them came from had some sort of underrepresented identity or experience, which means there's a need for those folks in different programs. Also, and we collected our data in 2024, so this was before 2025, but this past year, in April 2025, so over a year ago, the federal government, which you have probably read about the US federal government these days, came out and did Harvard University for having research summer programs that were designed for students of color, mostly students of color. And I'll give you some of those excerpts, but that also prompted us to say, like, this is even more important, not just to understand the programmatic and kind of organizational aspects of what made this successful, but it's really important to understand why equitable interventions like this can produce positive outcomes that everyone would want. Like, we want more scientists, we want more researchers, and we want them to be trained well. So the main question for the research study is, like, how does participating in a summer research program cultivate graduate education efficacy? And I also just, especially across the international context, but I use underrepresented students, but that meaning first generation students, or what I think you would call first and family students in the UK, low income students, students of color, or underrepresented in their field. So this is women in STEM. You could also say men in elementary education or men in nursing, but those were, at the institution, this was run through the graduate school, so students also had to be a part of a program that was affiliated with the graduate school. So nursing was not a part of the graduate school, but education could be. But in general, that's what I mean by underrepresented students. So I don't expect you to read this. I'm not going to read this, but especially if you get the slides later, this is part of the equal opportunity complaint that the federal government filed against Harvard in 2025 about issues of recruitment and hiring that was discriminatory. So this was specifically about Harvard was trying to diversify their faculty, which the federal government now sees as an illegal thing. But it goes on to say, not only did you try to diversify your faculty by hiring and creating equitable practices in your hiring, but you have all of these programs that are giving underrepresented students, and in particular students of color, opportunities at your university. So that's a list of research programs. Here's another list of research programs that Harvard has that the Equal Opportunity Office said is now discriminatory. And it's signed by the acting chair, but I thought this was, to give you an idea of where we're at as a country right now, the aggrieved individuals. So the federal government was opening an investigation into Harvard to include all employees, former employees, and prospective employees, and current and prospective training program applicants, participants who are white, Asian, male, non-Black, non-Native American, or straight, who have been, continue to be, or may be in the future adversely affected by unlawful employment practices complained of herein. So the Equal Opportunity Office is saying these folks are being discriminated against and are not doing well because of some of these equitable interventions. And so this, for this audience and whatever audience wants to hear this, I think it's just really important for us as researchers to be able to push back on that when appropriate, but also to understand how there are lots of policy actors that are contributing to things that are going to make it even harder to have better scientists and researchers. So why is this important? From a national perspective, international perspective, we need more scientists, but we also need more diverse scientists and researchers to understand wicked problems. But we also know that underrepresented students are underrepresented compared to their majority peers in both participation as well as success. So even getting into graduate school, success rates are not the same. We also know that supporting aspirations can improve outcomes in graduate education. But when we look at like what are some of those interventions, and especially the research on undergraduate research, a lot of the research and scholarship about outcomes of undergraduate research are based on academic year programs or students doing this during the academic year, when there are, at least at Harvard, there's like quite a few of these summer research programs that I think have probably been evaluated, but maybe have gone under theorized and under empirically researched. And this also, in some of research programs, I think what can be interesting about this is it's a different intervention along the pathway or the pipeline to produce researchers. So we can talk about education inequalities and primary education and all of the different places where we can be plugging leaks or getting people on pathways. But for this one, to me, it seems like a fairly low stakes or low cost even intervention of you have students who are at undergraduate institutions who are interested in doing research, but maybe just need the right experiences and right skill sets and right resources. So to me, this is a lot easier. If you can get folks on the right pathway here, it could be low-hanging fruit compared to fixing primary education. Yet we still aren't always doing the best job of it. So when we think about graduate school efficacy, we looked at, and I'm just using some examples of some work here, but we looked at the idea of research efficacy. So how people think about themselves as a researcher. We're taking that a little bit step further about not only being a researcher, but seeing themselves in graduate school to widen participation there. But we know that quality interactions with faculty mentors is helpful. We know that the perception of support from peers, faculty, and people are helpful. So surrounding support systems. And we also know the act of doing research is helpful in feeling like you can be successful in graduate education. For undergraduate research, we know that it increases research efficacy by the act of doing. You can feel like you could do in the future. People feel better prepared for graduate education. They're more likely to apply to graduate education. And I think the last part is also really important. They're also more likely to get into graduate education. So the act of doing research is not only helpful to build aspirations, but it's to build skills that can help get you into potentially your most optimal choice or option for graduate education. And that's also part of kind of the hidden curriculum. Like if you're not familiar with this, I specifically remember I was an elementary ed major at the University of Maryland. And there was a woman in my cohort of teachers that was in the honors program, and she said she was doing research. I was like, why are you doing research? We're trying to be teachers. Like, why are you doing this research stuff? And she was like, well, I don't know. I got in the honors program. Why not? Because I didn't understand like graduate education was about research. I didn't understand the importance of research, and I certainly wasn't exposed to it. So I would have never thought of these things. And so also working with undergrads that are doing research is both humbling and wonderful to see the potential that we have. So the theory that we use to understand this is based off Bandura's theory of self-efficacy, but is the social cognitive career theory. So it essentially takes it's a framework that explains how individuals develop academic and career interests and make vocational choices and achieve success, emphasizing the dynamic interplay between personal attributes, environmental factors, and actual behaviors. So if for this study, we're not looking at how successful they were at their careers or career choices, but we're kind of looking at this middle part about, and we're also not looking at their skill sets. Like I have no idea if folks were really good at pipetting or whatever they're doing in their labs. But we were looking at how well they felt like they could do in the future in graduate education. So we were looking at how well they did within their summer program. We looked at how they felt before and after. That would then get them on a path or would lead to vocational choices. This weather, like, fascinating.
This is a very British day, right?
Oh my gosh, it reminds me of Michigan. Like Michigan was like you could get all 4 seasons in like an hour. This is been like really all 4 seasons. So again, so that's some context setting. This is the research question that we were going for. To give you a little context about the actual research program, so it's at the University of Michigan. We're allowed to say it's at the University of Michigan. I mean, I haven't figured out if we're going to do that in a paper or not, but it was executed at the University of Michigan, which is not only a research-intensive institution, but it's also a resource-rich institution, which we understand not all institutions are resource-rich and have money and financial resources to pay students or to help them travel or have as many students. It's a 10-week intensive research experience for 40 social science and STEM. They have a separate program for humanities that's not a part of this. So there are no humanities students. What's important, and we'll talk about later, is all accommodations, food, and travel were covered. So students will get flown or trained or whatever. They'll get there, they'll get sent home. And then while they're there, they both get a stipend for the summer that pays fairly well. They get their food covered as well as housing. They also have, in particular, identity conscious academic and social programming. So there's a lot that students can opt into. So they'll have like a panel of women in STEM or just women academics. They'll have like dinner with women academics or folks of color or different things where that represent student identities that are in the space. And in particular, in the US, we have quite a few undocumented students. And so there's even specific programming for undocumented students and how they can navigate understanding graduate application finances and things like that, because there's some very logistical as well as communal things that can come along with that. And again, we'll talk about the social things in a little bit too, but they get a research mentor. So if they get put in a lab or a research team that often has other graduate students and lab managers and things, but they also get a graduate student coach that's not affiliated with their research. So that's kind of what I did that one summer. And that person helps them with application essays, thinking about which graduate schools they might want to apply for, answering questions, processing their lab. And then they get peer residential leaders, which are also undergraduates who are there for kind of like housing needs and social needs, things like that. So there's lots of support systems in place. In order to attend this, the student cannot come from the University of Michigan, so they have to come from another place. And most of those places are non-research intensive institutions. So they're regional comprehensives, what we would call in the US. So they would, places that are teaching, like more teaching heavy than research heavy. They are from US institutions, states or territories. They have to be mutually accepted by both the program. So the program has to say they are a good fit for the program, as well as the PI and the research mentor have to say they're a good fit. So it's not like faculty are getting people they don't necessarily want, or faculty are getting people they want but aren't good for the program. They have to be underrepresented in their field, like I mentioned. So students of color, low-income students, first and family students, and in particular women in STEM. Every once in a while, people can write essays to share why they're underrepresented. So that could be also by religion or political affiliation or things like that. And so people can also apply in that way. And here's the kicker, is that they also have to have prior research experience, some sort of prior research experience. So this isn't like you're doing research for the first time. And one of the reasons is because they want all of the students to be eligible to or to be competitive in the application process. And especially since it's such a small amount of time, if you're getting in a aeronautical lab and this is the first time you're doing research, it's going to be really hard to like learn those skills and learn everything plus be successful in 10 weeks. So part of the critique is like, oh, are you just skimming from the top? In some ways, yes, but also some of the students are coming from institutions where there's like no research labs really, but they've partnered with a faculty member who's moonlighting at another university. Like they're being scrappy to get research experiences for a lot of the students. Okay, now the project. So we use a social construction. I should have had a citation there. Social construction is epistemological stance. So we are understanding the lived realities of the participants. So like I said, I think the skills is a good example. So students can say, I'm not great in my lab, or I'm really great in my lab. We take their word for it. We're not doing any kind of triangulation to understand their skill sets or things like that. We're trying to understand their lived experience through their own reality. We're using interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA, not the bigger, which is often used in applied social sciences like public health or applied psychology. So we're trying to understand the phenomenon of going through this program and understanding themselves as potential researchers and graduate students in particular. But we're not doing the full phenomenological, like 3 interviews, things like that. It's a more applied qualitative process. We did pre and post interviews, which I'll get here next. So there were 22 students. So there's about 40 students. There was like 1 or 2 that had to drop out for various reasons, but we interviewed 22 students before the program started. So this was between 1 month and 1 week before the program started, 1.5 months to 1 week prior. And then we interviewed 23 students post-program. And that was about 2 to 3 months after. So they finished in August. We started interviewing people around October. The interesting thing is, and I don't know if anybody else has done a research project, I had never really done pre and post interviews. I've done like surveys before. I just assumed if you interviewed with us the first time, you'd probably interview with us the second time. Well, we like really struggled with that. And there were quite a few students who like interviewed the second time, but not the first time, which I was like, why? So we had 16 participants who interviewed both pre and post. And then, the rest were only interviewed once. In general, we covered a majority of the students. We had 29 total students. 27 of them were students of color, 16 were STEM, 13 were social science, and 22 were rising seniors. So there were about 7 rising juniors. So a little bit earlier in their potential thinking.
Can I ask you what does that mean, seniors and juniors?
Oh, okay. Thank you. So rising fourth. So okay, undergrads in the U.S. usually takes 4 years. So rising seniors would be going into their 4th and final year. So they're like applying to graduate school soon. Rising juniors would be going into their 3rd year. So they have more time to think about it because they're not applying that year. If that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Good. So all of the transcripts were transcribed during using the Zoom transcription, which is actually pretty accurate if you've used it. But we also went through and checked and cleaned them. As a research team, we had a primary researcher that did inductive coding, and I kind of created the first code book or took the first swipe after coding 2 or 3 transcripts. We used the code book, but we also had a process for adding codes as we needed to. But there was a primary coder who went and did the first swipe, and then there was a secondary coder that came in after to to check codes. We were also trying to get this quick enough so we could also give them feedback so they can improve the program for the next year or two in a practical sense. But all of this, as we all know, takes a long time. If there were discrepancies between codes, we had reconciliation meetings where we said, like, I agree with this one, I don't agree with this one, where were you coming from? I think we should add this one. And throughout the entire process, the research team was, we all had varying degrees of familiarity with the program. So we had an alum of the program who actually went through it, which was really helpful. She's a psych PhD student at Michigan right now. We had another person who wanted research experience, but she was like the partner of somebody who went through it. So she had no direct connection, but her partner went through the program. And that's why she was living in Michigan and wanted research experience. So we all kind of reflected not only on our affiliation with the program, which we all had some sort of, but we also were thinking about our own identities and experiences and how that impacted our data collection as well as our analytical process. I'm personally not a big memo person. I'm not a big diary person, but I took some notes, but other people were able to take notes as they wanted to, and we also shared those. Okay, so and here's honestly where I could really, I welcome your feedback. So we've grouped the findings into three main categories of intrapersonal motivation, validation through experience, and foundational support structure as a necessity. So for intrapersonal motivation, the first thing I'm like, community is social, it's not just interpersonal, but hear me out. But I welcome feedback on this. So a lot of students mentioned that they were doing research to give back to their community. So like literally my research on bilingual students are gonna help people like me. Other people, it's not exactly this binary, but like STEM folks weren't necessarily saying, I'm doing this to help my community, but I'm doing this because I know people look up to me. I know that my cousins or my siblings would be proud of me if I did become a graduate student, if I became a scientist. I want people, there's not enough people like me in my field. So there was a community aspect of contributing, not only sometimes from a research perspective, I want to help knowledge get into my community, but also me as a scientist or as a researcher is contributing to my own community. So this was a motivation they had for themselves, but it certainly was socially constructed. And they also had career advancement. And people talked about this in different ways. So there were some people that said, like, I think I need a graduate degree in order to get a good job. Like there were a couple of people who said that, but then a lot of people were saying, I know if I want to be a psychologist, I know if I want to be a microbiologist, I have to get knowledge and advance in the field. And this person, Alice, said, I know it's I can't just have experience, but I'm going to need a graduate degree of the education as well to do this. So participants were intrapersonally motivated, even that had social connections. But they gained this not only which some of them, were saying I need a graduate degree before, but also in the program, they were seeing the necessity of the skills and education that they would get for advancing their career. This, really similar to the theory, they received validation through experience. So Gabby said, I tried to run this one experiment and it kind of fell through, but being able to pick up on a subject and understand what I'm researching, and understanding I'm researching quickly within like 10 weeks and being able to present it to people at conferences. So there are a couple of things there, like presentations, research, reinstated my confidence that I can adapt to graduate education. And now I feel like I'm able to succeed. So there was the act of doing things, presenting, researching, but it was also being able to connect that to graduate education that I think is really important. So my experiment didn't succeed, but that's going to be part of graduate education. And I think not everybody understands that going into graduate school. I don't think I certainly did. And so being able to see the ups and downs of graduate school before you even get there, to me, I think was just really powerful, that one can learn that within a quick summer program. Jason, who was a social scientist, said, I learned so much more than I think I bargained for. My goal was to learn as much as I possibly could about the actual research content, but also whether or not I enjoyed doing research. So this person kind of beforehand also knew, like, I want to see if this is a career I want to do. It ended up being something he did want to do, but Jason knew he wanted to get skills, but also wanted to see if this was the career option and the path he wanted to take. And this is the part that when we asked them both before and after, it's like not surprising, but it was surprising by how much it came up and how it was so important. But and foundational support structures, I also welcome feedback on that term for these kind of three sub themes, but application support came up a lot. So when we asked students, like, what are you looking forward to, or what do you hope to get out of the summer? And then what did you get out of the summer? Like doing my essay. And I don't know about you, but when I think about like the research process, I'm like, the essay is such a small part. But when you're going through it, or when you're about to go through it, I do remember like, oh my gosh, like this is so hard to write about yourself and what do I want to study and how's it align with the people. But that was a really big hurdle for people. And so, and that's also one that can fairly easily be fixed. I'm like, that's one we can kind of solve quickly and put some interventions in. So this person said this was this was a post interview, but I feel a little bit ahead and calmer compared to other students. So there's also this idea of like comparing of if I'm ahead, then I can get into graduate school. I don't know that all students feel that way. I think some students are like, yeah, I can do graduate school. If I had to guess, and I think research would support this, is that underrepresented students, if they think that they're not as prepared, that they might have to feel over-prepared in order to do this. That wasn't necessarily a theme, but that exemplifies this in particular. But the application support was really important for students, and was quite a hurdle that they were looking forward to accomplishing, but also felt that they had a rough draft of their essay by the time they left, and was really important for them to feel like they could apply to graduate school. The academic mentorship is I think is pretty common in this literature, but what this person said, Dell, who was in STEM, was that it wasn't just the PI or the faculty member, but meeting with a graduate student that was within your field, that was relatively within your field, was so influential of how I chose school and what I'm applying for. So it wasn't just for PI. And we have lots of other things to support this. So the graduate student coach was helpful, but it was also the other graduate students and peers and near peers in their graduate labs. And so the idea of academic mentorship, like we could have put faculty mentors up here, but we didn't, because it was really academic mentorship that came from lots of places, but especially including advanced graduate students and early graduate students and near peers and peers. That provided students, especially an idea of like, I'm going to be like that person in a year or two. And so I think that was really helpful for people to see that they could do it. And at least in the States, we have a growing literature around basic needs, housing, food, shelter, transportation being really important for university. And we kind of know this, but there's now more policies being put in place for this. But I haven't seen this as much in the graduate education literature, but this became really important for this group of students. So Alma was a social scientist, and she said, I have a lot of instability housing-wise, like outside of the program. So I knew that I wouldn't be able to accept an internship or a job where I didn't have housing included. So housing was the most important aspect thing for me because I just needed that to be okay. So there was this really basic need of I needed housing. And does this directly correlate with like, I want to be a graduate student or a researcher? There's not a direct correlation, but if housing wasn't there, we couldn't get to the rest. And so what I want to talk about, and I welcome your feedback for, is thinking about how do basic needs fit into social construction of vocation and career, and in particular, graduate education efficacy. But my worry, the paper, this is also why I hate allowing people to pick their own pseudonyms. Like I had one that wanted to be called Darth Vader from like a study, and I'm like, then I had to put Darth Vader in my paper. So anyways, this person paper said, my worry is definitely financial stability. That's absolutely a concern. So this person was saying, if I later went on to say too, if this didn't pay well, I wasn't going to do it. Like I couldn't take on this opportunity, even though I wanted to do research. I might have had to be a server at a restaurant or something that would have paid well. So there's this idea of kind of foundational support that was there to allow students to be able to have some of the other experiences that help them develop a graduate education efficacy. But there was also this idea, and this is like, it's hard to, we're trying to explain it in the paper, but it also allowed people to see what they needed in graduate education. And like, well, everybody knows that they need housing and whatever, but graduate education funding packages, as many of you know who are in graduate education, can be really different depending on the institution. And so this also gave people a flavor by talking to graduate students, experiencing some things themselves as to what was needed and what they potentially even could ask for or look for in graduate schools. The limitations of the study, single site, single summer. Not all programs have the capacity to be as well resourced to provide transportation and all of these different things. But I'll talk about later, it's also going to be really costly if we don't have researchers and scientists too. As I mentioned, 16 of the participants out of the 29 that interviewed with us, there were 16 that did pre and post. So we were getting, some different answers, like some different perspectives and different ends of the spectrum. And there were no humanities students in this. And I think humanities research can be quite different. So I think that would have also brought in a different flavor. Things we're thinking about as connecting all of this, and then we'll start wrapping up, is the ability to do research in an environment that is both challenging as well as supportive is helpful to cultivate graduate efficacy. That's not groundbreaking. But where the theory came in was social cognitive career theory is helpful in understanding environmental influences and cognitive processes, but misses the social and foundational supports that were integral in graduate school efficacy. So we can see how doing research is helpful for thinking you can do research in the future, but we missed out on some of these other things that students said were actually really important for me to be in the program or for me to think about myself being a graduate student. And they have really important policy implications. So that's what I'm really hoping to do with this is complicate the policies around what resources it takes to make researchers and scientists. Academic mentorship is not just faculty, although faculty were important, but for some, they didn't interact with their faculty a whole lot. They interacted with their postdocs or their lab managers or their graduate students more, and that was okay. Like students got a lot out of interacting with lots of different types of academic mentors, and academic communities, I think, are actually really important. Maybe potentially just as important, almost as important as faculty mentors. And then the logistical support, such as application material or narrowing down potential application sites, just can't be understated in how important it was for students to feel like they could be a graduate student if they were able to get over some of those logistical hurdles. Which I think is, for those of us who were in graduate school a while ago, it can be like easy to forget that, of how that might be stressful for people, and how stressful that was. Implications for future research. I have these down here because it's different, but I think we need to theorize, or I want to do a better job of theorizing basic needs as part of both gaining professional experience as well as career decision making. I also want to theorize how collectivist orientations for underrepresented students impact career decision making. So when students said, like, I'm doing this for my community, in both doing research or being a role model. That I think also is under theorized in how people are thinking about careers. Researching the prioritization. So we have these themes and we started to try to come up with like priorities, and are there priorities? And I don't think we can from our data, but I think that would be interesting, especially as people are making resource decisions and policy decisions about what we can fund and what we can't. Are there a prioritization of different factors that play into graduate education efficacy? And then also understanding better the importance of, because a lot of the research will talk about faculty, mentors, but of the peer and the peer community and the near peer socialization that happens, of being in a community of scholars or a community of new researchers. One thing that we're not going to write about because we didn't have enough data, but I think would be interesting in the future, is we started to get, there were a couple people that talked about like, I can better advocate for myself now from this program because the program was well resourced, and I know that I need to find those resources when I go into graduate school. I don't know how to exactly. I don't know if I don't think we'll have space or enough to talk about in this paper, but I think it became really interesting to me, and it's based off my own personal experience too. Is like, I don't know if anybody else in the room has this, but when I learned that I had to self advocate for myself in graduate school, that's when I like really was able to hit the ground running. Because I was like kind of afraid to at first. I was like, Mom, that's faculty and whatever they say and like whatever. And when I heard students saying that they learn that at this stage, and I was like, oh man, they're ready. Like that's like so good to understand that before you get into graduate school and maybe allow other people to take opportunities or whatever. So it's just been something I've been mulling about, but we don't have. I wouldn't say it's a central theme, but it's interesting. And then also, what are the role of staff in these programs? Some of us being affiliated in staff in different ways. Students talked about like, oh, this person was helpful or whatever. But I also think we could do a better job of training and selecting people who run programs like this, because you could just literally be kind of doing logistics of it. But I think people who are staff who are developing relationships with students throughout the entire recruitment, admissions, and post program process. I think we're also really, I know we're influential, and it'd be interesting to write about that, about how students feel about that. Implication for practice. Summer programs are expensive, or they should be expensive, to truly widen participation. But also, it's really expensive not to have scientists and researchers. My federal government doesn't understand that right now, but hopefully other people will. And so one of the things is summer research programs are not only competing with other summer research programs, but they're competing with summer employment. So if you can make more money as a server, a lot of students who need to make money might do that instead of being a researcher. And that we would be losing out on so many important researchers, just because we didn't pay $1,000 or £1,000, whatever more. And so thinking about the basic, going back to the basic needs kind of programs. The holistic student supports around the peer environment that people are in, both within their labs and research communities, as well as cultivating one outside, I think was really important, especially for undergraduate students. And so thinking about how collective orientations of underrepresented students impacts their academic, their social, and their career decision making. Broadening definitions of academic mentors, which we talked about, and peer support. That's all I got. I welcome questions or feedback. This is very much a work in progress still. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so thank you for the talk, and I think it's I just have an observation that it's a like very like I myself have grappled with the SCCT, the cognitive career theory, and how it's the literature is not that conclusive about. So it's a very powerful theory in terms of recognizing the cognitive as well as contextual factors, but there's not much research on the environmental part.
Yeah.
And I think this research really like emphasizes on the environmental part. So I think, yeah, that's really powerful. And but like I'm just like now I'll read the paper and then see how to like really understand or document like that part of it, the cultural, contextual,
Yeah.
collectivist versus individualistic part of it. Because yeah, I was doing that and then I lost my interest. I found a paper that linked emotional intelligence with career decision making, and I found EI, emotional intelligence, as a better construct to
Interesting.
deal with career decision making. But that has also its criticism of being associated with a trait,
Yeah,
instead of like an ability. And
yeah,
I just, this literature is so confusing. Yeah. So now I'm just doing a qualitative research with adolescents, young people,
yeah,
and asking them how they feel about their career decision.
yeah.
Like doing a ground up approach instead
Yeah.
of dealing with all these constructs. So if you have any reflections on.
Yeah. So, I did. So when I first got into the literature, so I was not expecting the literature, especially around STEM and STEM identity and developing STEM scientists and stuff like that, is not one that I was really familiar with. But I wasn't familiar with the doctoral socialization literature. I have a paper about that. I like the idea of socialization more, but when I was looking at the work around this, that seemed to be kind of like passe a little bit. And I think because it is a little bit more amorphous, and some of the theories, specifically in graduate socialization, don't necessarily capture everything, just like this doesn't capture everything. When we were looking specifically, when we were kind of shopping around theories, and I let the graduate students who were on this, I was like, you have to defend like why you want to use it. So they're actually the ones who chose social cognitive career theory, which I think most of the literature also supports. Like most people kind of go down this road, I think. But I agree with you, and this is why I want to complicate it, is I think some of the environmental influences, the social cultural context is not just not there. And so I'm hoping we can complicate it a little bit more with that. Emotional intelligence, I'm less familiar with. I just know in a practical standpoint, its definition is wide. And so but I don't know the literature as much on that. But yeah, it also is like we were just, I don't know if you remember this, I had this red box, like we weren't looking at the skills, we weren't looking at what they actually chose, we were just kind of looking in the middle. And so, yeah, it's not perfect, but I think it helps us get to a place where we can complicate it.
Did you notice also, sorry, like anxiety around career as a theme? Did it emerge in interviews? Like were they not sure?
So definitely, so we asked less, well, and this is a good point too, we asked less about careers and more about graduate education. Lots of anxiety about graduate education. But again, a lot of it was about application and less of can I do it? There might have been that too, but it was really about the logistical, like I don't know how I don't know where I should apply to it, I don't know how I'm gonna apply, and who my letters of recommendation are. And in my mind, like that's the easy stuff. Like doing this stuff is the hard stuff, like figuring out what your topic is or what your career is within that field or whatever. But they were really anxious about the logistics, which is one of the reasons they were also attracted to the program, because they were like, oh, I get to work on my essay. And as we fed this back into the program is like, we've never really like we tell people that's what you're going to do because we want them to know that that's what they're doing, but they didn't realize that was like a recruitment tool. But that's, to answer your question, that's I think where a lot of the anxiety came from, was about the process of figuring out if they wanted to go or if they could go and how to go into graduate education. And that's also what we focus our interviews on.
Hi, thank you very much, Jeff, for the presentation. I want to share like a concern about the actual fact of this, of being like a summer or an external thing or an extra thing after your degree, because I think it's awesome to have that experience. Like I would love to have like 10 weeks of research experience with other people during my undergraduate or in the end of my undergraduate, especially because I was someone that realized I wanted to work in research after years of professional work in the field of higher education. But so it was not something like early in my undergraduate. But my concern is like if the fact that being an extra thing during summer can become like a new way of distinction, especially if these programs are very small and selected. I know that directed to underrepresented people, but very selective, so probably is going to be always small, and they can become a new requirement to follow graduate studies. So I was thinking if this early experience should not be part of your undergraduate, and make sure that these experiences are also considering underrepresented people during your 4 years of studying and not an extra thing. Like what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So a lot of the students participate, that's how they got into this program, is through programs that were like that. So one of the programs that are racist or illegal or whatever is the Mellon Mays program, which is a program in the US that's federally funded and has history, but it's specifically for underrepresented students. And it's a year-long kind of program, in particular to get people into graduate school for underrepresented students. So some students were recruited through that. So yeah, I guess to say is like, in order to get in the program, you had to have some sort of research experience to be successful in the short term. So to me, that's I've always been like, that's where I think inequality comes from, is because you've had to have some sort of cultural knowledge to get research experience to begin with, because you and I didn't like, so we wouldn't have been in this program even if we found out about it, probably. But also knowing the students and some of the research experience that they had was like, they weren't at Oxford getting in the best lab in biology. They were at the University of Puerto Rico, or they were at Virginia State, a small regional institution, or a historically Black college, who had minimal resources for research, but they were able to find it somehow. But yeah, I definitely think, and I'm not in a competitive graduate program, but I think the competitive graduate programs are always looking for experiences like this. And I think majority students are getting them in all kinds of different ways. And so this is one way to create an equitable intervention. But the fact, should you have to have it in order to get into the best programs? Like, no, but I think that's where we're at a little bit.
Thank you, Jeff, for your excellent presentation. And I have two small questions and also a reflection. The first question is, there are like summer research internships or lab internships, etc., which are very common in, say, computer sciences, etc., which are not targeted at underrepresented students. Have you considered kind of comparing the different types of programs and to see these ones targeting at underrepresented students, what are the implications as compared to those that are not targeted? And second question is, you're highlighting the importance of this summer research experiences and the training and preparation for future scientists and researchers. So we also know that for graduate education, some of the students will not be continuing the academic pathway, etc. So how do you establish this connection between the summer research experience and future scientific or research careers? And finally, bits of this reflection. There's this very similar type of program at Oxford University, which is called Unit Plus. And I was one of the supervisors for a program last year where we had 2 students that worked with us for that program. And a lot of things were very, very similar. But I was reflecting on how, because we need to volunteer to be a supervisor to provide this research project, and then students can apply. So this is a bit of self-selection in the first place. So meaning the supervisors were willing to support these students. And a small logistical thing is that I think those students here they will be waived their admission application fees if they decide to apply to the graduate degree, which was considered as very helpful. And we also talked a lot about the application preparations, essays, writing samples, etc., which the students also found helpful. And one of the students just decided to apply and is now studying with us here in Oxford. So a bit of similar similar initiatives here I thought I should share.
Yeah. I'll start from the back and then go to the front so when you were doing this program, you were working with their admissions essays and stuff?
No, I was the supervisor, so it's the academic mentor.
Yeah.
And then there were two students applied and we admitted them to work with us on a specific research project for this.
But it was also your responsibility to help them with their application materials, or?
It's not our responsibility.
But you of course did, because they,
we did that. Right. We kind of not like helped reviewing the application materials, but like went through the logistical issues and any questions they may have.
Yeah.
And to provide as much information as possible about the programs that we know of. And for the programs they were interested in that I'm not part of, I was kind of also connecting them with the people who are teaching the program. So that's the things we can do.
I will say, so we also from this project came up with like a practice report that we gave to the program to say, here's the things that worked really well. And we came up with like a list of like the 5 things that programs should do or whatever. And this we're trying to get more theoretical and empirical with, but I think the point about faculty mentor self-selection is really important. So in this program in particular, there's some faculty that do it every summer. They've been doing it for a while. But there's also faculty, because students might say, I want to work with that person because of their naval engineering something. And that might be a new faculty member. And the faculty might like say, no, I'm not taking a student, or I don't have time. But the faculty development, I think, would actually be a really interesting research project too, of seeing the evolution of faculty understanding how to work with students, specifically underrepresented students, specifically for a summer, I think also could be really beneficial. But to your point, it also takes up a lot of time for people. And so there is an associate dean that's attached to this in the graduate school that kind of monitors how faculty are being compensated. So they get some money for research funds, but they also try to like highlight them. Like the associate dean, I think, sent emails to their department chair saying like, we're really grateful for this and things like that. So there's like some sort of things. But yes, I mean, one of the reasons there's lots of these programs. I mean, for the Harvard, there's like they've named like 20 programs that are racist or illegal now. But when I looked at the literature, there's like not a lot of literature about this, and mostly, I mean, this could be evaluative, but I think it's for me an important aspect of education research is understanding practical problems or gaps in literature where we have some practical knowledge, but maybe we haven't thought about it in theoretical ways. And so that's what I'm kind of hoping to do with this a little bit. Now I forget your first 2 questions. There were questions.
I think the first question is around comparison.
Oh, comparison. Yeah. So I haven't thought about comparing. One, this is like kind of a side project. It was really to help give this program some shine. And I had easy access to data. And I had some students who had minimal research experience that wanted some. So I was also like kind of like reproducing the program with the students I was working with. So that's the logistical piece of it. The I don't know, the smart answer I should be giving is from our epistemological stance. These are students' social realities. And so I would say epistemologically, we don't have to compare to understand their experiences because we're just trying to understand their lived realities. But yes, I think it would be really interesting to see some of these probably elite computer science research programs that are not identity conscious or bring in underrepresented students as much, and to see what the preparation and experiences are. I think that'd be really interesting. If somebody wants to do that part too. And your second part.
graduate education and research career?
Yeah. So there were, especially the graduate mentors, there were quite a few who were not interested in graduate academic careers. And so it wasn't just for academic scientists, but like scientists in general. And there were students in their essay did not have to say they wanted to go into academic research, but they had to be interested and have done research and wanted a research career, which we know is, can be outside of the academy. So there was not a, but of course, faculty, we often focus on that. But I for the students and thinking about their career choices, there were quite a few who mentioned wanting to be a professor potentially one day, but there are quite a few, especially in STEM, that were interested in doing their nanotechnology, not in the academy.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and that leads on quite nicely. I'm the program manager for Unique Plus, so that was really good to hear of your experience. So I'm an administrator. Unique Plus is really pretty directly comparable to this because it's UK students only. They can be Oxford students. Who up to me going, but they can be very, very few. So mainly from other institutions and all from underrepresented backgrounds. It's quite big, so there's about 130 students on it each year. I wanted to ask a bit more about the perception of support, and to just unpack that a bit, because that's something that we've learned about it, both in terms of literal support that we offer them on the programme and in terms of how they think they'll fit in somewhere like Oxford. And I get quite a lot of pressure from academic staff of, just pile more and more in. And I actually push back and say, if anything, we want fewer participants and more support. So I wondered if you had any reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's especially for students who are underrepresented and may have doubts if this is the right place, like you need to have the appropriate scale of supports. So I don't know completely your context, but I would agree with you. I think if you can't support students, and students have a negative experience because you haven't provided the supports, then you're like doing the opposite of this. And we know from both research and other research that I've done, it can only take a micro interaction with somebody to turn you off. I never took a sociology course in college because I didn't like my sociology course teacher in high school. That's dumb. Like, that's the dumbest reason not to take a sociology course. And now I use a lot of sociological theory and taking graduate courses. But there are small interactions that can impact this. And I think it's really important, especially for underrepresented students who either need more supports to be on the path or to get on the path, that the supports need to be there, and probably quality over quantity. Because if you get to a point where you're having more students than you can support, you easily could be turning these students off from science and research. I did a year as a visiting faculty member at the University of Iowa, which has a very similar program. And so I had met the graduate dean, and I was like, I actually worked with this program. It's really great at Michigan. And she was like, like, we never get any students to apply and whatever. So yeah, like, you want to help, whatever. And so I talked to a program manager type person. They also didn't have the appropriate staff to do it. And they didn't build community, they didn't do a lot of the support systems. And I was not the most fun place to live in. And so I was like, if you want people to come there, you have to really sell it, you have to really provide a lot of supports and show that you can build community there. And so it can easily not be done well and just be done. And I think that actually probably has more detriment than help.
Someone even knew that we're just assigning them rooms at the moment, and they had a really clear need for an ensuite bathroom, and they replied and said, I can't believe such a prestigious institution would even care. So that was nice to know that we've got an easy win with them. But yeah, I totally agree. Really small interactions, like a negative comment from a college porter, can really switch them on.
And unfortunately, that your job is going to have to be to remind people of that.
It is.
Because it's easy for us as academics to forget about that. It's easy for all the many people that go in to support students, dining hall worker, everybody, to realize that it can take a couple of things just to turn somebody completely off from a subject or from a potential career, and that it's, especially for underrepresented students, I think it's all of our jobs to support all students in reaching their potential.
That's really interesting research. I think maybe some thoughts on this question.
Please.
We mentioned about support and also your question about basic needs.
Mhm.
I actually just did a presentation today to a couple of civil servants at Department of Education, UK government, and the piece of research is about mapping the support system for care experienced young people
Mhm.
to go to higher education and participate in higher education. But this is not at the kind of graduate
Yeah.
or kind of summer research program level. And so I particularly looked at what local authorities, what kind of support local authorities provide, because basically here in the UK, the local authorities are kind of corporate parent, and
Mhm.
they have the responsibilities to take care of them and also support them. And the kind of what some of the key findings are: first, there's the cliff edge of support for people who are completing the degree, and also for those who want to pursue a postgraduate degree. So basically, what you're mentioning here, like those kind of summer research or the transition to a research.
I'm writing down. Sorry, I'm writing down cliff edge support. You said.
It's like, so if at pre-entry level, entry level participation, maybe the support is really high, and then the support have just completely dropped
Mhm.
when they're finishing,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
when they want to pursue a
Yeah.
postgraduate degree. So I think this kind of programs and also Unite would be really, really beneficial because there's just not a lot of opportunities there. And I think the second thing is your question about what is basic need. I think also depends on how vulnerable they are and how much support they can get outside of, for example, institutions or this kind of, I don't know, corporate parents, or if they don't have families to rely on, and also probably needs to look like a closer look at what it takes to bring them to these programs without concerns and anxieties. I think what I learned a lot from this program is there's so many things that you can do, and there's so many things that you need to be in place. For example, it's not only, I think, accommodation are the kind of key things, and also if they can cover the kind of living costs, because otherwise they won't be able to let's say take time from their part-time job, whatever. And maybe even also how can they get there? They need the transportation support, and even just to settle in, feel being at home, even for just, I don't know, 3 weeks of time, because it just life stability is a really important factor in their life. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, it's just funny that you say this too, because when I was a graduate student in Michigan, I was a mentor for a program we had for care leaver students, which you would call care leaver in the UK. And I ended up doing a presentation about graduate school because the program, we're preparing people to get jobs, but there were so many students who also were thinking about graduate school. But the cliff edge support that you talked about is like, as you know, is like really real, especially for when students leave the university. Because at least at Michigan, they had a program that was giving a lot of support and money for care leaver students. And so that, like, post that was pretty scary. Yeah, it was just a random connection.
Thank you, Professor Jeff, for your presentation. And I got a friend and she has shared me with her being a coaching for mentor at a summer school in Scotland, and which is also designed targeted for the underrepresented international students, some from Africa. And she said her feeling that the soft skills for coaching is a very crucial part for the underrepresented students, like some communicative skills or some collaborative skills, or some the career planning skills, time management skills. She thinks the softer skills may play a very crucial role. So I just wonder how this program might combine with these skills that especially the undergraduate, underrepresented students that they demands, and combine with the research capacity building for their future academic journey. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think in some ways it's covered under the validation from experience. But actually, this is a really good point because I think when we were thinking about that, we've been mostly thinking of, oh, I did this experiment, I did these skills, I kind of got like skills, but there were definitely students, and this makes me think like maybe this is I need to go look at the data again, but students thinking about like, oh, I can manage my life doing this. So the things that you're talking about, managing time or the soft skills that go along with this, there were definitely students that post, and especially in their posts, were talking about, I realized I could do this while having a partner or having a child, like, because there were some older people that had children. Yeah, so I'm going to write it down to go back and look at the data. Because I think that's a really good point that students certainly talked about in here. It also, I'm trying to think about, I mean, because I didn't do all of the interviews, but or read all of the transcripts. My inclination is also to say that STEM students were more likely maybe to like figure out how to balance STEM and being in labs with life than others, and mostly because in this program, like if you were a STEM student, you were kind of in a lab 9 to 5, whereas the social scientists were less like that. And so I think they were less concerned about balancing and life and things, but I don't know that for a fact, so I want to also look into that too. But yes, thank you for your question, comment, because that's going to give me something else to look at. Thank your friend too in Scotland for giving you this information.
Yes, if we, oh, do we have any? Okay, I think our online. Okay, thank you, Jeff, again, and thank everybody participating and also for the questions and comments. And today's the official last day, but I hope you're still